Sigmund Freud's Moses and Monotheism, published in 1939, explores the origins of Judaism, the figure of Moses, and the development of monotheistic belief systems through a psychoanalytic lens. Freud's provocative arguments delve into Jewish religious history, ancient Egyptian culture, and psychoanalytic theory, offering a unique, albeit controversial, interpretation of Judaism's emergence and its impact on Western monotheism. In this book, Freud questions the identity of Moses and Judaism's foundational narratives, challenging conventional understandings of religion. 1. The historical Moses. Freud begins by exploring Moses as a historical figure. Contrary to the conventional view that Moses was a Hebrew who led his people out of Egyptian bondage, Freud theorizes that Moses was actually an Egyptian. He bases this on cultural, linguistic, and historical arguments, notably drawing on the possible Egyptian etymology of the name Moses, which he links to the Egyptian word mes, meaning child or son, as in names like Thutmose. Freud asserts that Moses was likely a follower of Akhenaten, an Egyptian pharaoh who promoted the worship of a single god, Aten. This pharaoh's short-lived monotheistic reforms, radical for ancient Egypt's polytheistic culture, profoundly shaped Freud's interpretation of Moses. Freud argues that Akhenaten's monotheism, centered around Aten, left a deep impression on Moses, who then became a transmitter of this monotheistic belief. After Akhenaten's death and the subsequent reversion to polytheism in Egypt, Freud suggests Moses took the monotheistic ideology to the Hebrews, whom he subsequently led out of Egypt. According to Freud, Moses introduced the worship of a singular abstract deity, laying the foundations for Judaism. This theory positions Moses not merely as a leader, but as an agent transferring Egyptian religious innovation to the Hebrews. 2. Moses as a figure of psychological projection. Freud presents Moses as an archetypal figure central to Jewish identity, which he frames through psychoanalytic theory. He suggests that Moses embodies both a paternal and authoritative figure. Freud's psychoanalysis views religious belief as an extension of familial relationships, particularly the child-parent dynamic. According to Freud, just as children idolize their fathers, people look to religious figures for protection and guidance. Moses, then, becomes a father figure, serving as the primary authority and lawgiver for the Hebrews. In the book, Freud draws on his earlier theory of the primal horde, wherein a dominant father figure is killed by his sons, who then feel guilt and establish a system of prohibitions to remember the father's authority. He postulates that this pattern might be mirrored in the Hebrews' relationship with Moses. Freud proposes that Moses was murdered by his followers during a rebellion, and that this traumatic event left a lasting impact on the Hebrews, eventually solidifying their identity and reinforcing monotheistic belief. He theorizes that the collective guilt and repression stemming from Moses' murder fueled religious devotion and inspired laws and rituals to honor the slain leader. 3. The role of memory and trauma. Freud introduces the idea of historical memory in Moses and monotheism, positing that traumatic events, even if not consciously remembered, can persist in the collective psyche over generations. Freud's theory parallels his clinical experiences, where repressed memories from childhood can later manifest in symptoms or behaviors. For him, the memory of Moses and his teachings left a latent imprint on the Jewish people, even if they no longer consciously recalled these events. Freud argues that the laws, rituals, and religious practices that formed Judaism acted as a means to subconsciously process this unresolved trauma. Freud's theory of trauma thus serves to explain the resilience of monotheism within Judaism despite its initial rejection. He suggests that monotheism reemerged and took a firm hold in Jewish identity due to the unresolved guilt and longing for Moses. For Freud, the sustained practice of monotheism was not merely a religious preference, but a psychological compulsion shaped by repressed collective memories and trauma. This idea of transmitted trauma remains influential, especially in fields such as psychohistory and cultural studies, which examine how collective memory shapes identity and belief. The evolution of monotheistic religion. Freud expands his analysis by considering how Judaism influenced the development of other monotheistic religions, particularly Christianity and Islam. He argues that Judaism's revolutionary concept of a singular, omnipotent God laid the groundwork for monotheism's spread in the West. However, Freud emphasizes that each religion adapted and modified this foundational concept in distinct ways. For instance, he sees Christianity as an extension of the Oedipal dynamics he identified in Judaism, focusing on the figure of Christ as a substitute for the lost father figure. Freud suggests that Christianity's emphasis on Jesus as a divine son allows for the resolution of the repressed guilt associated with the death of a father figure, Moses. This adaptation, he argues, contributes to the distinct psychological appeal of Christianity, which offers redemption through the figure of a loving, forgiving deity. Islam, similarly, builds on the Abrahamic foundation but establishes a strict monotheism with Allah as the sole God, transcending human characteristics. Freud's psychoanalytic perspective emphasizes the ways in which each monotheistic religion addresses deep-seated psychological needs for authority, redemption, and reconciliation with a paternal figure. 5. Freud's critique of religion. Freud's exploration of Moses and monotheism is also a critique of religious belief as a human construct driven by psychological mechanisms. Throughout Moses and monotheism, Freud remains skeptical of religious doctrines, viewing them as expressions of the unconscious mind's desires and anxieties. He sees religious beliefs as projections of inner psychological conflicts rather than as representations of objective truths. This critique is consistent with Freud's broader views on religion, which he famously described as an illusion in his earlier work, The Future of an Illusion. In Moses and Monotheism, Freud's skepticism is directed not only at the historical narratives within Judaism, but at the very nature of monotheism itself. He suggests that the human need for a single, omnipotent God reflects a deep-seated desire for an idealized father figure who provides protection and moral guidance. According to Freud, this desire is rooted in the child's dependence on parental authority, which is later projected onto religious figures and deities. 6. Reception and criticism. Freud's theories in Moses and monotheism have sparked considerable debate and criticism, especially within religious and academic circles. Some scholars argue that Freud's assertions about Moses and Jewish history lack sufficient historical evidence, dismissing them as speculative. For example, Freud's idea that Moses was murdered by his followers and that this event shaped Jewish religious identity is not supported by traditional historical sources. Critics contend that Freud's interpretation relies more on psychoanalytic concepts than on historical facts, leading to a narrative that reflects his biases. Freud's hypothesis that Moses was an Egyptian follower of Akhenaten has also faced scrutiny, as many historians believe it oversimplifies the origins of monotheism. While the similarities between Akhenaten's worship of Aten and early monotheism are intriguing, there is little conclusive evidence linking them. Moreover, Freud's reliance on the psychoanalytic theory of collective memory and trauma, though groundbreaking, remains controversial. Some scholars argue that collective trauma is a challenging concept to prove or apply to historical populations, as the mechanisms of transgenerational memory remain largely theoretical. Nonetheless, Moses and monotheism has also been influential, particularly in fields that explore the intersections of psychology, religion, and history. Freud's work opened new avenues for understanding the psychological roots of religious belief and the ways in which trauma can shape cultural identity. His theory of collective memory has influenced later thinkers and writers who explore the impact of trauma on cultural identity, including Holocaust studies and post-colonial theory. Freud's Moses and Monotheism is a bold exploration of religious origins, offering a psychoanalytic interpretation of Judaism's foundational figure and the development of monotheistic belief. By reimagining Moses as an Egyptian and situating monotheism within the dynamics of trauma and memory, Freud presents a unique perspective on religion that challenges traditional narratives. Although criticized for its speculative nature and reliance on psychoanalysis, Freud's work remains significant for its interdisciplinary approach and its willingness to tackle complex questions about human identity, belief, and collective memory. Moses and Monotheism invites readers to reflect on the psychological underpinnings of religion and its enduring role in shaping cultural and individual identities.